je ris, pourquoi je pleure. Voici le SOS d'Intérieur auditrice. J'ai mûri, fier sur toi.
Good evening, everyone. It's evening here. My name is Viktor, and then I'm going to talk today to Darren, who is a great astrologer from Astrology.com. And then we've decided to have a look at a chart together. And we found quite an interesting one. There is a singer called Dimash, and then he really picked up in 2017. He's got a sensational voice. His ratings are super good. People started falling in love with him. And the reason why it's quite interesting is because he's an opera singer. And I don't think opera is such a big hit nowadays, but for some reason, people just love his voice. So we decided, Darren, to have a look at today why people might have fallen in love with him and where this huge success come from in his chart. So welcome, Darren. How are you?
Good. How are you, Victor?
I'm doing
And thank you for having me join you with this.
Oh yeah, I love working with others because obviously we have probably different intakes, perspectives over a chart. So it's always good to have a little bit of a friendly astrology chat, I guess.
Yeah, most definitely.
Did you listen to his songs ever?
Yeah, when I do artists or any other celebrity, I try to use my intuition by listening to the kind of words that they use in their sentences, and I'll pick up on their vibes, or even in his instance, think about the lyrics that he writes, since he writes his own music. And it was a little challenging for me because he sings, I couldn't find any music where he spoke English, but I know he sings in different, like 11 different languages. So he's very, very talented, though.
The reason why I had a look at his chart, because I heard of him a couple of months ago, and I was completely blown away with his voice. And because of his stage presence and the way he sang, I was like, this guy must have plenty of Scorpio within him. So
yeah.
In the middle of the night, I started doing some research, having a look at his natal chart. And when I saw, 3 planets in Scorpio, including the moon and karmic nodes and rising sign and so forth, I was like, yeah, here you go. He has plenty of Scorpio, surely.
Yeah, he has many octaves. There's lots of ranges in his voice.
Exactly. Where do you think his voice is coming from?
Second lord in the first with the trine to Venus. His second house, rules the body part of the throat. He has it in the first house. So anything second house related topics would be a big part of his life. You see there's Jupiter right on the ascendant with a really nice, beautiful grand trine aspect from Saturn and Venus, which could obviously, there's beauty involved because Venus is all about creativity, beauty, and even Mercury. It's an out of sign conjunction, so there's a gentleness to the way that he talks. Mercury's communication,
yes,
and how you enunciate words. And he has a great Mercury, by the way.
Yeah, he does have a great Mercury, surely. I mean, Venus rules the vocal cords as well anyway. So Jupiter trine moves probably from the house of body. It gives him an extremely nice tone to it. Obviously, we've got a Cancer Venus. So Cancer is quite gentle and it's all about nurturing and so forth. So the tone of his voice could be very kind of warm and pleasing and pleasant and so on. So definitely one of them is there. In my opinion, probably Mercury helps quite a lot as well, because the throat belongs to Gemini. So Mercury is very strong there, as you said. And probably Saturn helps there quite a lot as well, because it's in Pisces, in the fifth house. Now, fifth house is all about self-expression, and Pisces is all going to be about creativity, as well as Pisces rules music. So definitely that grand trine helps him a lot. And to be honest, I would love to see a Jupiter and Venus trine in my own chart as well, because that's one of the success factors, right, in a chart.
Yeah, I really think this grand trine is like, that grand trine really stood out to me when I first pulled up the chart, because of the layers and layers of talents that he has with his music. Like, it's not one specific thing. Like, he does pop, he does classical music, contemporary music, and Saturn represents, you know, things that are more traditional. Like you said, he does opera, which is more of a ancient, old school thing.
Yeah.
And then Jupiter, I think Jupiter being its ruler of the second, I think that's where the ranges go up and down, because Scorpio is about, you know, upheavals and highs and lows. And by being in feminine signs, especially Venus being in Cancer, you know, he can go, he has a bass, but he can sing really, really high. Like, he can sing soprano really, really well.
Exactly. I guess also Neptune is involved in this story as well, because Neptune, again, in a traditional sign now, Neptune also rules music, dancing, creativity, and it's in the third house, so something again to do with the throat, as well as something to do with social media. So no wonder at one point in his life he's going to get picked up. Now, that Neptune has got a conjunction to Uranus as well, which is quite tight. And Uranus can bring the extremes in the picture, like, you know, very low, very high, and someone singing 6 octave is just mental, especially when it comes to a man. So I think that Neptune also quite helps that a lot.
Yeah, and I kind of noticed that with the Uranus and Neptune and Capricorn generation, it's like, because it's in Capricorn, which represents old things, traditional things, and Uranus representing new, modern things, it's like modernizing things that are old school and ancient, including astrology. You know, millennials are really big on astrology.
When he sings, he actually started mixing like pop voice with opera. And I think that is really shown with that Uranian energy with Neptune in Capricorn. And to be honest, I'm not a big fan of opera, but I can listen to him for hours because somehow it calms me as well. And that Neptune is pretty much a very calm planet in the chart. It's in Capricorn, so Capricorn is all about surely but slowly, right? So somehow he can penetrate with his voice, you know, into your soul. And that is very much seen from the rising sign as well, because, you know, when I looked at him and then I saw this poker face, but very intense type of performing, I was like, he's so rigid, he's so, you know, but still he can have a very positive impact on people. So definitely I got fascinated by him. Do you use Moon as the planet of talent?
Yes, it's just something that I don't typically say out loud, because I never heard anybody else say that. But to myself, I've always thought Moon has something to do with talent, because Moon, I've noticed, can play a part with rhythm.
Yeah.
Like Venus in Cancer, I noticed that there's a little bit of rhythmic motion.
Yeah.
And with Moon being on the first house, you know, when it comes to the body, they do have a sense of flow, or they know how to dance if there's no, you know, harsh aspects going on. And then there's a supporting aspect from Neptune, so that can make him extra, you know, there's like fluidity in his bodily movements.
According to ancient astrology, Moon has got a lot to do with talent. And when it comes to abundance or what type of job to choose, ancient
That's
astrology
really
tends to be
interesting.
looking at moon quite a lot. Because if moon has got an applying aspect to any of the planets, that would be an
Yeah.
indication of having a certain type of talent within you. And we tend to be having a look at mainly the traditional planets. So Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto can be out of the picture. However,
Mhm.
I think because we are in modern times and you know we shouldn't be looking over the generational planets. I think we can also have a look at those. Now, Moon's closest aspect is going to be probably coming up to Uranus when it's going to become an exact sextile, and that has got a conjunction with Neptune in the third house. So that's probably where maybe some of the talent also can be coming from. I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's pretty interesting there. And well, I also found quite interesting that I don't know much about him, and you can't really find much information about him online.
Yeah.
But you can see this Saturn in the fifth house. Now he's been singing since the age of 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, and probably he's coming from a very disciplined family as well. Um,
Yeah.
Probably, you know, the unconditional love is there with that Pisces, but I still believe that as a kid he was working extremely hard. I know he was singing already when he was 2, and he won his first piano contest when he was 6 years old, and so on. So definitely, he's inheriting it from somewhere
Yeah.
strongly.
Yeah. Somebody from the family. I think I read somewhere he was raised by his grandparents, but his parents and grandparents, he comes from a musical background. And with Saturn being its third and fourth lord, he would be very skillful and also very, very focused and disciplined when it comes to creative arts, with Saturn being the fifth, lord of the third. So he's very, very skillful because third house rules the body part of the hands and dexterity. It's also the lord of the fourth, so he's inheriting that. And with these, Saturn is a dry planet, but it is getting supporting aspect from Venus, which would be, is it cold and moist? The
Yes.
nature of the planet? Cold
Yeah.
and moist, right? And Jupiter is considered heat and moist, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, then yeah. So like Venus and Jupiter, it's like throwing its juices onto this dry planet. So I've noticed that Venus trine Saturn people, they're very orderly when it comes to the artistic talents, and
Mm-hmm.
there's like structure to it. Like I don't know how to explain it, but I think you know what I mean. Like it's like he's very talented with playing musical instruments, like piano and you know other things.
Do you use part of fortune when you do readings?
Uh, Sometimes, yeah. For him, I forgot to check, but yeah, sometimes I do.
I do love using part of fortune because I have a look at every single chart when it comes to part of fortune, because that would be a point in the chart which is going to be showing how to achieve success, maybe joy and happiness, and an element of abundance as well. And what I have seen there is that part of fortune is in conjunction with Mars. So he must be working hugely hard to achieve that publicity, public success, what he wants to achieve. Obviously, that Mars is in the seventh house, so yeah, not necessarily the strongest placement when it comes to Taurus, but the house position is great, and probably part of fortune helps there quite a lot. And now
Hmm.
that is ruling also the first house, which is you. So I think it is clear here that he, eventually he's going to get into the public eye. Because in my opinion, if you want to be famous or you want to be somehow like popular among people, there needs to be a third, seventh, and 11th house activation going on. And Mars is the planet of drive. So where you have got the focus, where you put your energy into. And obviously that Mars is ruled by Venus. And Venus has got a lovely sextile towards that Mars. So the only little problem or fear I've got that singing 6 octaves all the time, I don't know what's going to happen, at one point to his voice. Do you think that it's a worry that he's going to have something at one point to his voice?
Maybe. I'm trying to see if Mars is, because Mars rules Aries, the 6th house, which can rule illnesses and diseases. And it's in Taurus, opposing Jupiter. Probably at some point. It's just a matter of when. I'm not sure of. But yeah, it's definitely a possibility with that
Yeah,
opposite.
that's exactly what I was looking at as well. I mean, we all love Jupiter, surely.
Right.
But at the end of the day, Jupiter has got negative qualities as well, such as greediness.
Yeah.
Now, Jupiter opposing that Mars, obviously the planet of drive, I think he can force his voice to overwork, which eventually can cause something in the throat, which is obviously a Taurus, Taurus/Gemini energy. So I think he definitely needs to be careful. However, Venus, as the vocal cords are lovely aspected by Jupiter and Saturn as well. So even though there is that push energy coming from Jupiter, probably from his personal experience or his desire, but Saturn maybe in the 5th house, which could be the house of schools, right? Maybe there is also a restraining energy coming from there. Maybe a mentor, Saturn, telling him you need to be looking after your vocal cords a lot more.
Yeah.
Also, do you work with planets on 0 and 29 degree? I'm always fascinated if others do.
Yeah, I do.
Because I've noticed that Mars is on 0 degree as well. How do you interpret 0 degrees usually?
Usually 0 degrees is like, sometimes the results of that planet are hard to be manifested in a tangible way, or sometimes it's almost like it's like a baby, like it's its first time, behaving this way.
Yeah.
Like an immaturity with that planet.
Yeah, that's exactly how I interpret that as well. That from a karmic perspective, it's something which the person just started in this lifetime and need to master the skills. Now, with this voice, I don't know whether he sang in his previous lives or not, but definitely when it comes to his drive, probably he's very, very driven. And now we've got also South Node in that 7th house as well. Interesting to see that there is not so much information about his relationships online when I read up on him. But probably with all that very strong Scorpio energies, he needs to be focusing on his personal development anyway in this lifetime. And then maybe later on, quite a Venusian type of person can come into his life.
Yeah. He could
Interesting. You said that he was raised by his grandparents. Whenever I see Moon in the 1st house, which is one of the grandparents' house, I always find my clients somehow being strongly connected to one of their grandparents. And he's got Moon in the 1st house.
Yeah.
Usually Moon for me is one of the indicators of your health. Like in traditional astrology, we tend to be calling as a planet of health, but also obviously the planet of mom as well. And maybe with that mom in a fixed sign, she could be like an ice queen. Obviously Scorpio is a fixed water element. So one of the ways of water being a a fixed energy, is in the form of an ice. So maybe mommy was showing some type of cold shoulder towards him and being very disciplined. But obviously he's got the success right here in front of him. And also I've noticed that he was born very close to a full moon. Do you work with moon phases?
Yeah, yeah. I find moon phases really interesting.
Yeah, he was almost born at the new moon. I mean, full moon phase,
Full moon, yeah.
which gives him also again a huge visibility. So that's definitely very interesting there also. What do you feel about this Neptune and Mars square? Because that also
Oh,
kind of
Neptune.
struck me.
Oh, Neptune, Mars square. Oh, it's hard to say because there's not a lot of information about him, but just seeing it with clients and people that I know, I notice that they don't express their anger clearly, or they're purposely vague when they're upset. But when it's a decent aspect, I feel like sometimes that can also give the physical some fluidity with their physical drive. Like some people are really good with gymnastics, or they can be really into yoga. And
Yes.
with Neptune being in the third, maybe some skills with his hands. I mean, even though it's a square, sometimes squares and oppositions can work in people's favor. It just may be a little bit more difficult, but it is a trine by sign. I think that helps, but it's still a square by degree.
Yes, which I always tend to be looking at the same way, like you do. So by
Mhm.
sign it's a trine, by degree it's a square. So I think it's when I see that, I believe this is like an element of choice of the native, which energy you go with. Are
Mhm.
you going to be choosing the Mars element of that square, or are you going to be choosing the Jupiterian element of trine? So I tend to be describing to clients both. Now, when I have a look at Neptune, one of the first meaning which comes to me is being the planet of escapism, and
Say
having
that again.
the planet of escapism.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Yes, and having that square with Mars, I'm just wondering whether or how much he enjoys always being in the public eye, not having a moment for himself. And I saw one of his posts the other day. He got quite offended. He was eating at an airport, and people started taking photographs of him eating an apple. And then he made a comment like, I can't believe I can't even eat without being looked at. That's such a private moment for me. So why are people taking pictures of me at that moment?
Hmm.
Which I found
Yeah,
pretty relatable to that Neptune and Mars square. Because
yeah,
probably he's very secretive, very private person, with all that Scorpio energy, what he has got.
yeah. And then with Rahu there, he's very much into himself. And another thing I notice with people who have Mars in the seventh house, and I can attest to this because I have Mars in the seventh house,
Oh,
that
really?
Mars in the seventh house can cause irritation with the public.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it causes irritability because Mars is more self-oriented and independent, and it likes freedom, it likes to roam. And but when it's in the seventh house, a house of compromise and sharing, it's irritating for Mars. So it's irritating for that person to be bombarded with people or dealing with people all the time. So yeah, I think that could be part of it too. And he has Rahu in the first, so he's very much about like I just want to be alone. I can imagine him being like that.
Yeah, sure. And also, if I take the other meaning of Neptune, which is something to do with obsession, then I guess to a certain extent, if he takes the trine element of that aspect, then probably he enjoys it, but probably he
Mhm.
just misses quality time with himself or with his parents, or or, you know, a little bit of a privacy, I would say.
Yeah.
Surely. Do you work with Chiron energy?
Sometimes.
Because
Yeah,
I also
sometimes.
found it very interesting, him having a Chiron in the 11th house.
Yeah.
Chiron is, for me, is the area of life where you can heal others, but you can't really heal yourself. And it's always a reminder where you should be putting a little bit more focus so that your body and your spirit heals as well at the same time. And obviously, he's got that in the 11th house, which is all about social media, internet, Facebook, Instagram, and all this type of new age stuff. And yeah, and that Chiron is interesting to see that he managed to overcome his fears of staging. But fair enough, if you practice that from an early age, probably it's easy to overcome.
Okay.
And then what also is interesting there, that Chiron is ruled by Mercury, and Mercury is in the 8th house as well. So I think there is an element of definitely a need to be sometimes alone, be in private with my own thoughts.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you feel about the Pluto and the Moon conjunction? Because I feel like that's very important in this chart as well.
Moon Pluto people are really interesting to me. I feel like they have a desire, especially him with Rahu there, emotional purging. You know, like when a person cries, they need to really let it out, like, you know, in a very intense way, very intense emotions, and especially by it being in Scorpio,
Yeah,
really, really intense emotions. And you can see it in his face too, in his facial expressions or his eyes on his album covers too. But he's probably very much into himself, like understanding himself, and a desire for emotional expression, and purging out those emotions. And I think he's doing it in a healthy way with his music and his art and his creativity. Like when he sings hard and loud, but in a beautiful way, though. Like you can see all of the emotion just coming out in his music. You know, you feel his soul and his spirit. And I feel like that's like a really healthy way to get, you know, his emotions and feelings out.
exactly. I mean, whenever I have a chat with a client, and you know, they tend to be very afraid of certain planets. Obviously, the most common one is Saturn, but also I think Pluto is pretty much coming up on the list as well for people. And fair enough, Pluto
Yeah.
is a very psychological planet. I usually say that's the planet of psychological fears. So for
Psychological
me,
fear.
yeah, the ones which probably the ones which you kind of were born with, or the ones you are bringing from little age. And for me, Uranus is more like the mental blockages, what you create to protect, you know, your mind basically. And with that, Pluto being the planet of fear, and the Moon is the planet of emotions. So I think he's using his songs to express his emotions, which he might not want to say out loud.
Yeah,
Obviously, Scorpio tends to bury all those, sweeping them under the carpet. And of
yeah,
course, after a while, it can burst quite heavily. So I think songs, maybe what he's writing, is a way of communicating about his fears and pain, and I think that really comes through his music as well.
yeah. One of the lyrics that I was able to find, one of the songs was related to fear of abandonment. And I know Scorpio, in general, Scorpio energy, there can be, how did I want to say this? Like a fear of abandonment or sensitive to betrayal. I
Yes,
notice, especially with Moon, like it has a lot to do with how the person feels. And Moon and Scorpio people, they can be intuitive, but they also, by it being a fixed sign, they can be really stubborn about what they feel their intuitions are and thinking that they're right about those intuitions. Whether they're wrong or right, they get stubborn about it, and it eventually leads to paranoid thoughts because, you know, their intuition will be the same and consistent. And with Pluto being there in Rahu, it's like really, really expressive. And Pluto is a detoxifying energy too, so there is a strong desire for purging.
Yeah, that's right.
Mm-hmm.
What type of timing techniques do you prefer using?
Timing techniques?
Yeah. What's your
Oh,
favorite ones?
like predictions or
Yeah,
whatever.
that's right.
Oh, I like profections a lot. I'm also starting to learn about oh man, I forgot what it's called, but primal directions.
Okay.
Yeah, I like primal directions and profections, and I like I use Fedaria, um, and I use all of that stuff before I use transits. I use transits last, you know, and then because I feel like, especially with profections, I feel like then I do it in that order: profections, then transits, and then use everything else to validate what I'm thinking or feeling, and
For
progression.
me, for me, transit also is a validation tool, like the
Yeah,
very last one to check off,
yeah.
whether things are gonna happen or not.
Yeah, because sometimes transits are so subtle, you know, or nothing happens at all. Like you can have three people with Jupiter going through their seventh house. One person gets married, one person meets somebody, and and nothing happens for the other person. You know,
Or maybe
absolutely
the
nothing
third
all
person is
year.
gonna get divorced. So
Yeah,
I've
yeah.
seen it many
Then that
times.
happens.
I've seen it many times.
Yeah.
By the way, I put because he really got popular in 2017 in January time. That's when
Hmm.
he kind of conquered the social media. So I pulled up his solar arc
Hmm.
chart, and we can see that the rising sign is ready to be changing very shortly within a year.
Hmm.
It's going to be on 29 degree. Now, 29 degree usually talks to me about a summary of what I have done in the last 30 years and then 29 years. And then basically the question here is whether I am going to get crowned or I am going to, kind of lose
Hmm.
everything what I have done so far. Now, what I have noticed that his rising sign 1.5 years ago went on to Pluto. That's when he won actually his first talent show, I think in Kazakhstan,
Hmm.
and then he got invited to China in 2017. By the time the show finishes, his rising sign is going to be shifting anyway,
Hmm.
and yeah, he's ready to take on the world. And then also Jupiter is there as well, so coming up to 29 degrees. So definitely a year where he is pretty much focusing on something huge. And thank God it played out just quite nicely for him. I mean, having a look at his natal Jupiter, it's quite well aspected. It's in a good house, not necessarily in a great sign, but gets support from Venus, gets support from Saturn. So overall, that's a strong Jupiter. And obviously, Jupiter is going to be entering the second house. Probably he signs $1 million contract with
Hmm.
that easily. And um, and obviously Jupiter is going to be in its own sign, so
Right.
that's very, very powerful. Another one which I've seen is that the Sun, when he started the contest in China, which brought him the huge success, is actually bang on Mercury.
Mercury.
So yeah, Sun is on 2446 and Mercury is on 2505. So
Hmm.
actually within a couple of months,
Hmm.
it's going to be exact. And that's when he becomes the second in the competition. A Chinese person got the first place. Obviously, he became the one who, he became the memorable one out of all. So I think we can see why he also got successful by Solar Arc as well.
Yeah, I forgot to mention Solar Arc. That's one of my favorites too.
You know why I like it so much? Because it's simple, and then
Yeah.
looking at the chart, it's quite easy to tell, you know, that something is happening in your life. So, for instance, let's say that Sun. Oh, that's not going to be a great example. Let's say midheaven is on 14 degree. So at the age of 19, it's going to be hitting Chiron. So,
That's
you know, if you start talking to a client, it is so easy to ask what happened at the age of 19. Something might have happened in regards to, you know, Leo energies, for instance, or with your midheaven energies. So
yeah.
Solar Arc is a very good tool to use, I guess.
I've noticed it helps with rectifications too.
Do you do
So
rectifications?
no, I do it for me, but not for clients because I need to master it first. But just with my immediate family, like my grandparents, it has helped. I've noticed. Yeah, but I don't do it, for clients because I'm just not confident enough with rectifications.
I've got a friend of mine, and she never starts a chart without rectifying the native's birth time, which I think it's a great practice, because if you want to be, giving the right dates to the person, then obviously the midheaven and the rising sign are very time sensitive. They tend to be moving 1 degree every 2 to 4 minutes. So
Exactly.
therefore, if they are not accurate, then your reading might be off actually in that sense. If you
Yeah.
use midheaven and rising sign as a timing point in the chart. But rectification tends to be quite a huge job, in my opinion, as well.
Yeah. I feel like
Yeah.
everything is super time sensitive because birth certificates, typically, most of them don't document seconds. I think I've had someone do rectified mine, even though I already know my time of birth, and they predicted something really, really accurate. There were only 3 days off by a very specific event that happened in my life, and they were only 3 days off. So I'm thinking, well, it's the seconds then. I feel like it's only just like 15 seconds,
Yes, that's
of
right.
off. That's why when I give, predictions on certain things, I get very vague on days. I don't like to pinpoint specific days. I just generalize it with months.
I tend to be given a time frame as well, you know,
Yeah.
because it can be a little bit of a misleading stuff. Of course, when you use solar arc, the planetary movements are not going to be changing, not going to be changing, obviously, if the minutes are off. So those could be maybe helping narrowing down or pinpoint at least a week when stuff might be happening. But I have also noticed with astrology, it's not necessarily about the timing. I think it's also about the process you go through. So when I teach, for instance, about transits, I always tell my students that, you might be having a transit going on in your earth signs, but the earth signs, especially Taurus, or the fixed signs, tend to be very stubborn. So they need a little bit more time to, evaluate that process or to jump into that process, what might be coming. So I usually tell them when you do a transit reading for someone, you might be want to say that, oh, this might be happening in a year time, even though you see that in 4 or 5 months time, because you never know how quick their reaction is.
Yeah.
Gemini, for instance, doesn't have any issue of jumping on a roller coaster if they are told so. They're gonna go and yeah, why not? Same with Sagittarius, they're gonna jump and take the journey. But fixed signs, for instance, are a lot slower than the mutable.
Yeah, they're stagnant in nature.
And you are pretty much fan of rulership, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Yeah, I'm real big on rulerships. Yeah.
And how do you or how do you interpret a rulership?
I always think about planet, sign, then house in that order first. Then I think about the houses that are rules. Like if I wanted to talk about relationships for this guy, and I see Mars there, my eyes immediately go to Aries and Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about him that could be impatient with relationships. Maybe he would be the dominant one in relationships, potentially argumentative because it rules the sixth house. So there's some competitive nature when it comes to relationships.
Yes.
Or it could be he's somebody who's just passionate, or he's good being alone because Mars can stand on its own. So when it's in the seventh house, they're okay um, being alone and not being in a relationship. And then I think about since it rules the first house, which has a lot to do with what this life is going to be about. It's probably going to be a lot to do with interacting with people, which is kind of what he has to do since he's an artist. He has to engage with people all the time. He may be impatient about it, like irritated sometimes, but that's what he has to do. Ascendant ruler in the seventh usually can sometimes bring a little bit of fame.
Oh yeah, surely, surely.
Yeah, because it's
Um,
you interacting with, people.
yes, exactly. I think rulerships are hugely important, and we tend to be forgetting about it. I mean, when I
Mm,
see people commenting on social media, oh, I've got this planet going through my 10th house. What does it mean? And I would love to comment on it every single time if I had the time. But how would I know? Where is your natal planet? What
mm-hmm,
house does it rule? Obviously, without a chart, you are not
mm-hmm,
able to, you are not able to help. So, for instance, if you've got, I don't know, you've got, let's say, Uranus is going through his seventh house. It was in
mm-hmm,
conjunction in March with Mars, right?
mm-hmm,
So, what does that bring to me? Is it going to be something to do with relationship? And it's not necessarily
mm-hmm,
the case because his natal Uranus is in the third. So maybe it's an
mm-hmm,
element of a new album is coming out, for
mm-hmm,
instance. And I do believe, I think he came out actually with a new album in March, if I'm not
mm-hmm,
mistaken. So definitely I would give that advice to people,
mm-hmm.
not to forget what the natal promise of the chart is.
Yeah, and I always uh, try to give wiggle room when it comes to interpretations and predictions because the houses have layers and layers and layers of meanings behind it. And that can be kind of like frustrating sometimes, because sometimes I'll forget to mention something that a house represents, and that can be like frustrating sometimes because then it's like, man, I forgot that this house means that too. I always have notes with me, to list everything that the house represents, and then when a planet is there, I can't only think about the house and the planet. I got to think about the houses that planet rules. So if there's a transit over this guy's sun in the eighth house, it could be whatever is happening. It could be eighth house related topics, or it could be career related because sun rules the 10th house. So I have to
Right.
think about all of that stuff, and that's why it can be exhausting sometimes because we technically don't know unless you have great intuition, but technically, I don't know what's going to happen. I can only tell you what could happen based on what the house represents, and it has all these meanings, and the planet's there, and what the planet represents, and the house that it rules, and what all those things, what it represents.
Do you work with Egyptian terms by any
I'm
chance?
starting to. I just started doing that. Yeah. And I
Because
think it pretty well.
I've also noticed, now I kind of know the Egyptian terms by heart, but
Yeah.
I used to have it on my wall for years because it's easier just to have a look on the wall what's happening. But I've noticed that when it comes to some of his so when it comes to ancient astrology, the talent is always going to be lying around Jupiter, Venus, and Moon.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to have a look what Egyptian terms they are ruled by. Now,
Yeah.
if I have a look at his moon, his moon is actually ruled by Saturn in Egyptian terms. And then
Okay.
I guess his Venus and Jupiter, the other two planets which relate to talent, is going to be in their own rulership.
Mm. Okay.
So most of you, if someone is interested in Egyptian terms, they can Google it, Egyptian terms, and then you can find plenty of images. But they could be an additional layer to the planet, and it could be an additional indication of what talents you were born with. So I'll give you an example because I know my chart by heart, obviously. And five of my planets are ruled by Jupiter in Egyptian terms,
Mm.
and two of them by Venus, which is a great luck, by the way. But obviously, Jupiter is one of my talents, I guess, which is all about teaching.
Yeah.
So then having a look at your natal Jupiter, the house position or the sign position can also give information what you are talented at. So now he's got quite a few planets under, I think he's got 3 planets under the rulership of Saturn, which is interesting because Saturn is in his 5th house, which is the house of self-expression in Pisces, which again bring in the element of music. And Saturn rules the 3rd house, which
Mm-hmm.
again brings in the community, the spirits of community, and something to do with social media as well. So I reckon his talent also can be seen from that too.
Mm-hmm. And being skillful as well in anything, his creative artistic pursuits.
Exactly. And as you mentioned, probably when it comes to opera, Saturn is going to be playing quite a huge part. So now, if he wanted to break in with pop music, he might not be as popular as with opera because Saturn is more like the traditional type of music with that Pisces
Traditional.
energy, right? So that's
Mm-hmm.
also quite interesting. And what
Yeah.
are your astrological plans for the future?
Oh, me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm currently working on something. I'm working on a class. It's gonna take me a while. It's gonna take me a lot longer than I expected, but uh, I really want to teach foundational astrology first, and then I want to teach about house lords, how to use them, and how to blend house lords with aspects too. Because a lot of people don't know how to interpret that. Like this. What's a good example? So his. Let me see. So, like for example, his Saturn in Pisces with the grand trine to Jupiter and Venus. It's not only the planet you want to think about. You want to think about the houses that it rules. So, like Venus is supporting Saturn, but because it rules the 4th and it rules the 3rd, then Venus is supporting 3rd house related topics and 4th house related topics as well. Like he have
That's
a
right.
pleasant relationship with his grandparents and his parents and siblings, if he has any. I don't know, but yeah, same thing with Venus and Saturn supporting Jupiter. It's not only supporting Jupiter in his body, but because Jupiter rules the 2nd and the 5th, it's like supporting 5th house related topics and 2nd house related topics. So he's obviously wealthy, second lord on the 1st, so wealth is coming to him. And his creativity. The houses 1, 5, and 9, those are the trinal houses, which has a lot to do with your life and purpose. And these three planets are definitely screaming musical arts, traditional musical
Totally.
arts, and they're in the Dharma houses, 1, 5, and 9. His life path, his purpose. What he's here to do.
Oh, that's very great. I'm not so much aware of the Dharma houses,
Mm-hmm.
but definitely the first, fifth, and the ninth is somehow definitely real. Ninth house, in my opinion, is somehow relating to your goals anyway. What is getting created in your head, and the 10th house is gonna be making it real or not. It really depends how strong
Yeah,
your 10th house is. I
yeah,
also love having a look at sects as well. Now, the sect is an ancient concept that in a day chart, Jupiter would be the strongest planet of yours, and in an eye chart, Venus. Now, he was born daytime because Sun is above the horizon. It's above the rising sign and the descendant axis.
Mm-hmm.
So his Jupiter is hugely strong in that first house. It's a cardinal house, and obviously getting or giving support to Saturn, giving support to Venus as well. So probably again another indication here, what you just said, that he can manifest his life purpose if, probably with ease with that Jupiterian energy.
Yeah, Jupiter and Saturn, yeah, they do well in day charts.
Exactly, and then we're gonna have a Jupiter and Saturn conjunction coming up shortly anyway, which is obviously another topic to talk about.
Yeah.
We're not gonna do today.
Oh, okay, cool.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
I enjoyed having a bit of chat with you
yeah,
about
this was fun.
someone's charts. I hope your classes are gonna be coming up very shortly. I'm intrigued to see them as
Yeah,
well, how you approach stuff.
yeah, thank you.
Thank
I'm
you,
working on
and
it,
thank
guys.
you very much. Thank you,
You're
everyone,
welcome.
for watching us. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you managed to learn a little bit. We just basically wanted to give you a little bit of maybe a little bit of a knowledge of how to pursue a chart, and maybe some techniques you might not have thought about it yet. So if you've got any questions from us, you can comment below, or you can even email us, and we are more than happy to give you a hand if you get stuck. Thank you very much. Thank you, Darren, and have a lovely evening, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.